Hello everyone, Juxtaposition here. Today's video I'm going to discuss the calendar year of 1996 and how it relates to some of my videos that I've done regarding the invisible hand, money laundering, black ops, wet ops, murder, homicide, nefarious activities, psych ops, terrorism, anxiety, and or enforcing the oaths of the cult. Oath of secrecy, oath of obedience, oath of human sacrifice, oath of poverty, aka continued employment, and then you can get into retribution and psych ops. All right, so quickly going through the list, I have 6 events or 6 situations. I have 3 deaths, of which 2 are definitely homicides, and 1 might be a homicide, or it could be so-called natural causes. You decide. Let the viewer decide. That's what I say. So the first event I want to cover was on March 17th, 1996, and this is the very confounding, disturbing, baffling situation where Oliver Stone, the famous director of JFK and Platoon and Wall Street, and Born on the 4th of July, and Putin interview, and Ukrainian war documentary, or pseudo-documentaries, not really sure Oliver Stone knows the exact accuracy of the history that he's referring to, but I can tell you that Oliver Stone, for sure, is controlled by the invisible hand. Otherwise, we wouldn't have known about any of the movies I just referred to. They would never have been disseminated. They may have been produced, but they certainly wouldn't have been available for the general public or myself to view. So if you want that, you have to make a deal with the devil and Oliver Stone, whose real name is Silverstein, Oliver Silverstein. It would appear that he made such a deal, as did Sharon Tate, for example. She made such a deal with MGM and CBS through Filmways. It's a deal for life, or else you get whacked, right? And we know that Natalie Wood apparently made a deal like that too. We know lots of people did, from Marilyn Monroe to Judy Garland, from The Wizard of Oz, Judy Garland, to Cass Elliot, to Keith Moon. It's a long list. Jimi Hendrix, Jim Morrison, plus. Brian Jones, the Rolling Stones, just go on down the list of people who I think attempted to opt out, leave the cult, jailbreak. Anyway, I can't figure out why Oliver Stone would drive over to the Cielo Drive crime scene where Sharon Tate was murdered, where Abigail Folger was murdered and left to bleed out on the lawn. Why Oliver Stone would drive over to 10106 Sunbrook Drive to go see Timothy Leary, a career CIA operative, the LSD maven, tune in, turn on, drop out, Timothy Leary. He's living at 10106 Sunbrook Drive. Don't be fooled, people. It's a cul-de-sac. It's 30 seconds down the ice plant from where Sharon Tate and Abigail Folger were bayoneted to death with military M7 bayonets by professional soldiers in a black ops operation. And Sharon Tate and Abigail Folger worked for the CIA. And they were effectively murdered by the CIA because they were quitting, they were resigning. And I don't know why Oliver Stone needs to go to that crime scene to give a gut well card to Timothy Leary, who's allegedly dying of prostate cancer and will die about 60 days after Oliver Stone's visit, which is on March 17th, 1996. And Timothy Leary dies on May 30th, 1996. So however many days that is. You should know that just 3 days after this very bizarre oath of obedience visit by Oliver Stone, then we have 3 days later, March 20th, Lyle and Erik Menendez are found guilty by a jury on their second trial, and they're found guilty on March 20th, 1996, for a crime they did not commit, because their parents were murdered by professional black ops assassins. Then on April 27th, 1996, about 40 days after the Oliver Stone visit to Timothy Leary, who is lifetime CIA person, we have the murder of William Egan Colby at age 76. And that was in his kitchen at the Rock Point, Maryland fishing cabin that he owned. And he was murdered, I think, about 8:45 p.m. And he disappeared for 9 days, then reappeared dead as a doornail on a beach 1 kilometer away from his kitchen. I'm calling that a professional murder by professional people, just like the Sharon Tate murders, just like the Jose Menendez murders. We have the William Egan Colby murders. Timothy Leary passes away the next month on May 30th at age 75. He's a career CIA. All right? So far we have William Colby being murdered. Then we have Timothy Leary dying of prostate cancer. I'm not calling that a murder, but it is in close proximity to William Colby's murder. And both of those knuckleheads spent their entire professional adult lives working for CIA. And they both died within 30 days of each other. Okay? William Colby died on April 27th, 1996. And Timothy Leary died on May 30th, 1996. And Oliver Stone paid homage to Timothy Leary, a CIA spook. That makes Oliver Stone a CIA partner. That's what that makes him in my book. Then on July 2nd, 1996, we had the Judge Stanley Weisberg preside over the sentencing of Erik and Lyle Menendez, giving these two young boys life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Now, this is 7 years after their parents were murdered, right? And these two kids would never have been arrested. Never. They never would have been arrested and never been charged with the murders of their parents, were it not for a patient of Jerome Oziel, a psychologist in Beverly Hills, and she's having an affair with Jerome Oziel, and she's taking drugs, and Jerome Oziel breaks up with her because he's married and has a daughter, and she gets mad at him, so she goes to the Beverly Hills Police Department to make rape charges against her psychologist, the same psychologist that's seen Erik Menendez. And then she tells a story that the Menendez brothers murdered their parents, and that her boyfriend / lover / married boyfriend, Jerome Oziel, said that they did it and told her so. Anyway, without that testimony, without that police report, Erik Menendez would be out and about today, along with his older brother Lyle, who were 18 and 21 years old when their parents were brutally murdered in a home they didn't belong to. It was a temporary home whilst they were finishing up the remodeling of their Calabasas ranch property, 14 acres in Calabasas, which is 18 miles to the northwest of this Beverly Hills home, which was home to Elton John and Michael Jackson before Jose and Kitty Menendez moved in there. So it's a surveillance house, people, just in the same way that Cielo Drive is a surveillance house for parties, scandalous activities, and perhaps a murder. All right, then we get out to nearing Christmas 1996, and we have the mysterious garrote strangulation of a 6-year-old child, JonBenet Ramsey, in Boulder, Colorado, at 755 15th Street, Boulder, in a 5-bedroom, 8 baths, 11,376 square foot beautiful home, owned by John Ramsey, her father, and Patsy. Now, John Ramsey is an executive vice president for Lockheed Martin. That's right, I said Lockheed Martin. And John Ramsey was integrated into Lockheed Martin through his company Access Graphics, which is software which you can decode. Lockheed Martin wouldn't be purchasing any software unless it was surveillance software. Lockheed Martin is the general contractor of all things technical surveillance. That makes John Ramsey in the technical surveillance business. And he started out with Advanced Products Group, which was then merged into Access Graphics in much the way that Noam Bloom's porno business was integrated into Carolco Pictures, which was really a part of Columbia Pictures, CBS, Masonic Eye, and Warner Brothers, because that's who Carolco Pictures did business with: MGM, Paramount, CBS, Columbia Pictures, and all the former employees of Mason International, which was a part of CBS, essentially worked at Carolco Pictures, which is a CIA name of a CIA defunct company down in Panama, Banana Land, where all the drug processing goes on down that way. And the CIA invisible hand has a lot to do with everything that happens in Honduras, Belize, which is an expatriate enclave for clandestine service, British intelligence and CIA people, El Salvador, Guatemala, Panama, right? So John Ramsey was working for Lockheed, and he's not just an ordinary person, he's an executive vice president. And Access Graphics sold over $1 billion of software in 1996. For the first time, they crossed over the threshold of $1 billion in sales. So it's not a little company, and John Ramsey isn't a little vice president. He's an executive vice president. And his daughter gets murdered down where his wine cellar is, the day after Christmas, or Christmas night on December 26, 1996. Very peculiar, because John Ramsey is all about security. He's very concerned about security in his business dealings. And you know that this 11,000 square foot home is fully surveilled and secured. So the idea that a burglar would break in and leave a note for $118,000 for the balance of his bonus payment for that year is sort of on the poppycock absurdity scale. I never believed that story. I never believed the ransom note. And I believe that John Ramsey knows who killed his daughter. I believe that. And I believe it was a part of a cult ritual having to do with the invisible hand, and much in the way that Colonel Paul Tate's daughter, Sharon, was murdered, much in the way that Peter Folger's daughter, Abigail Folger, was murdered, much in the way that Enos Mejia's daughter, Abigail Folger, was murdered. You see, and that's a clandestine murder, people. The JonBenet Ramsey, without looking at any of the facts of the case, you already know it's a clandestine service murder. You know that because Vanity Fair is involved. You know that Lawrence Schiller is involved. Guess what? Vanity Fair and Lawrence Schiller are involved in the cover-up of the Sharon Tate murder, right? That's right. They were. Vogue magazine was involved too. Playboy magazine and Esquire, they were involved too. And guess who was involved in the O.J. Simpson case? Vanity Fair, Lawrence Schiller, yeah. So you know, and William Colby, who got murdered in 1986, his son was involved with the O.J. Simpson murder case, Carl Colby. So you know that the O.J. Simpson murder of Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman has an element of clandestine services activities, because certainly the jury did not get the verdict correct in that case. And look at the judge that they had. My God, what a disgrace. What a disgrace. Everything about that trial was a disgrace. And the Menendez case was a disgrace. It took 6.5 years to convict these innocent boys. The only difference between the OJ case, which only took about a year, is the time. The Menendez took 6 years longer. And the Charlie Manson, that went quick like a bunny rabbit. That went real quick. Because there was no defense offered. There was no defense offered in the OJ case, and he still was acquitted anyway. That's how screwed up that case was. So what I'm telling you, without getting into too many particulars, if you see Lawrence Schiller, typing up books, it's CIA, okay? Because he works for CIA in terms of fake news and fake books. And Vanity Fair, fake. In other words, they want to get your eyes off the bullseye. They don't want you focused on what's really going on here. All right, that's it for today. Just wanted to mention that 1996 was a busy year, as I think every year is busier with the clandestine services. I think this is what they do. They whack people for a variety of reasons. Obviously, if you have loose lips and you're telling stories to your psychologist, like Abigail Folger was, like Erik Menendez might have been, with respect to what his father actually did for a living, which was work in the porn industry, and was working in the porn industry undoubtedly when he was at RCA. It's just we don't talk about that, right? And when you have people like Oliver Stone, whose father's name is Silverstein, going over to visit Timothy Leary, who's a career CIA maven, that's a cult ritual, right? Just like John Frankenheimer driving Robert Kennedy to his death by a Lockheed employee, Thane Eugene Caesar. So don't be surprised if you find out that John Ramsey's daughter, JonBenet, was murdered. I mean, Lockheed is very often involved with murders and assassination. Francis Gary Powers was murdered. He was a Lockheed employee for dozens of years. All right? JonBenet Ramsey was murdered by garrote. It wasn't a suicide. It was a murder. A 6-year-old little child garroted. Robert Kennedy was murdered by Thane Eugene Caesar, who was a temporary Ambassador Hotel security night. That night only. His first and only gig as a security guard. And he worked for the skunk works at Lockheed at the Burbank Hollywood Airport. He also was controlled by Robert Mayhew, you may know, worked for Howard Hughes Aircraft. So he's a spook for the aerospace business, which would include Hughes Aircraft and Lockheed Martin, which is where John Ramsey was executive vice president. So it's pretty simple math. I'll let you do the calculation, but whenever I see Lawrence Schiller pop up, in a rice field, I figure he's working for the CIA. Take care. Bye-bye.